Hey everybody, welcome to James Quest, and last night I just got back from watching the new horror movie Him, which I guess is more of a psychological thriller, but no, there's definitely some horror elements in there. But anyways, yeah, this one has been an interesting one. You know, the trailers are everywhere, and people are kind of like, okay, so it's a sports movie and a horror movie combining together, you know, the clashing of two genres that I haven't looked into it, but as far as I know, have never really clashed together like this. Because, you know, your typical sports movie has like this guy coming up in the ranks. He's the newcomer. He gets to meet some of his idols, and then he trains and he fails, but then he trains more, and there's like a montage sequence. You know, that's how sports movies usually go, right? And of course, now this one is thematically, this thing is layered. Like, there's so much going on, from like the dark side of fame and money and all this stuff, and there's also like, okay, the kind of the I don't know a better way to put it, I guess the grooming aspect of football athletes, right? Not like in that way, but I mean like basically a lot of football athletes, especially those who come from less wealthy backgrounds, right? They're pretty much brought up with the idea that sports is one of the only ways to kind of get out of this life situation. And so a lot of those young children are like, basically like, they're taught sports at a very early age, and like that's what their life is, you know, and that's how you get all of these college athletes. And then you think about like the percentage of like how many of those people actually go on to play professionally, right? It's very competitive, both literally but also like in the sense of career trajectory, right? Anyways, there's just a lot of themes about like the kind of the toxicity of that, you know, about like you have to become so obsessed where like it's gonna break your brain, you know. like this has to be your life, this has to be all you care about. It reminded me of Whiplash a lot. If you guys have seen Whiplash, kind of some of those themes about like, hey, what do you do for greatness? What is the dark side of trying to pursue greatness? You know, is it actually worth the cost of trying to be the best? So some similar themes to Whiplash. I think you guys should go watch that one also. you know and this one also, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler because it is in the trailer, but it's like a mild spoiler, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it now. Early on in the film, the main character gets hit in the head, let's put it that way, and he basically is suffering from this brain trauma the entire movie. And so you're also kind of dealing with an unreliable narrator. You don't know specifically what some of the imagery is real or not real, and you're kind of questioning everything the entire time you're watching this thing. And so even by the end, there were still a couple sequences where I'm like, okay, but what about that? Was that in his head? Did that really happen? I don't know. I still don't know. And yeah, the movie pretty much stays a mystery up until like the last 10 minutes, where we're kind of given somewhat of an exposition dump. They don't over explain everything, but some of the major points where you were like, okay, well, they introduced this thing, it's gonna be important somehow, and they very, very quickly explain as much as they can in the last 10 minutes, which I think might rub some people the wrong way. Maybe some people might walk out of this feeling like they didn't get enough explanation. Other people are going to be like, oh, they tried too hard to wrap everything up way too fast. And overall, I'm kind of curious how people are going to feel about this, because like I said, this is much more of a psychological thriller before it gets to the real like horror elements of it. So it's not just a straightforward like, oh, he's a football player and scary stuff is happening. It's like, you don't know what's real, he doesn't know what's real. There's a lot of weird dream sequences. There's like seemingly dream sequences happening while he's awake. There's there's just a lot of weird stuff happening, a lot of imagery that still doesn't quite make sense by the end, and you're like, okay, thematically I understand what this is kind of meant to represent. I understand what they're going for, right? Like, these are obsessive fans over here. This is what money does to you. This is the contract, right? There's stuff like that, where you kind of understand what they're going for. But yeah, there's definitely things that you're going to be scratching your head about. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think like what it is saying is going to be fascinating to see people break this thing down. But yeah, I'm not sure. As a horror movie, I feel like the ending kind of saves it to be like, okay, but there is stuff that's happening. You know, it's not entirely psychological. Like by the end of it, like, okay, real things happen, so that's cool. Yeah, I think I always prefer it that way. I don't like the psychological horror movies where none of it happened and there's nothing real, because those always feel kind of like you're just popping a balloon. I'm like, oh, that's lame. So I do appreciate that, like, oh no, there really is stuff. You know, this was not entirely because of the head injury. And I gotta say, everyone did a great job in this. You know, like everyone's menacing and creepy, and you can't tell what the proper motivations are for everybody. I also got to say, there are some scenes in the trailer that are not in the movie, which was surprising, because there's a couple of moments where I'm like waiting for that thing to happen and it didn't happen. I'm like, okay, I wonder where that would have been in this. But yeah, overall, just there's a lot to break down here. There's a lot of stuff about, you know, just fame and obsessiveness and, you know, sacrifice, but also like physical trauma, mental trauma. You know, what does it say about us that we pay so much money to watch these people basically ruin their bodies and their minds for our entertainment? You know, what does it say about us how we treat these sports teams? You know, like we basically worship the symbol and the name and the colors, you know, and then it's like, oh, do we even like if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, like you're a fan of the team, but then the team roster is constantly changing, right? But like it doesn't matter who's on the team, you're a fan of the team, you know. And like so it starts to become like this weird like cultish type thing. And yeah, like there's definitely a lot of stuff to break down here. I will also say I wouldn't explicitly say this is an anti like football thing or an anti NFL thing. I think it definitely can be read that way. But I think it does just kind of like want to make you maybe take pause and be like, okay, hold on. What are we really doing here? What have we kind of normalized about like the violence of the situation? Because you really think about like how when those, is it CTE, right? Like when all those reports were starting to come out a couple decades ago, like the NFL was like trying to block that. They didn't want that truth to come out, you know, because it would hurt the reputation, it would hurt the money, right? Which it didn't, obviously, but also like, okay, so what does that say about us? Like we all know that that's a thing now, you know, that trauma to the brain constantly, and we all know that that's like actually a disease now. What does it say about us that like we just kept going? Like, I don't know. Really, really fascinating. I feel like parts of like some of the speeches that were given in here were definitely inspired by the Michael Jordan documentary. I forget the name of it, but the Michael Jordan documentary where he talked about how like obsessive and kind of like you have to become crazy in order to become the best, because you have to train that much and care that much, and it has to be all that your life is the game. So I feel like parts of this were like directly quoting that, you know, different sport, but same idea. So yeah, just this is a really interesting one. I'm fascinated to see how different communities take this, you know, the sports community, the horror movie community, just in anyone who might be in like a real life situation like this, you know, like when you were a kid, did your parents push you into sports? Did they make you think that, you know, ball is life, right? Like is this what it is, you know? And then I'm fascinated to see what someone who maybe grew up with that mentality watches this movie, and like maybe it gets a little too real, maybe you know, maybe they watch this and are like, oh, that hit a little too close. I'd be really, really interested in that. Anyways, yeah, this is one that I think people are going to be talking about for a little while. Some are going to hate it and be disappointed, but others are going to be just kind of fascinated with the layers that are here. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Bye.